Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is the Arkansas chapter coming to the table, and we have a very special presentation tonight with Betty Kilby Baldwin and Phoebe Kilby sharing with us their insights from their wonderful book, Cousins. And I wanted to turn things over to Kwame Abdul-Bey, the co-convener of the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement, to begin our event tonight. So Kwame.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you for this is actually the final day in our week-long observance of the National Day of Racial Healing in the state of Arkansas. Arkansas is the only state in the country that observes the National Day of Racial Healing during a week-long event instead of just a one-day event. The National Day of Racial Healing was founded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation 6 years ago as a means to restructure funding for the grants that they gave out to grantees. Here in Arkansas, we began observing the National Day of Racial Healing 3 years ago as a statewide community effort, and each year it has grown and grown and grown. I'm very honored to say that after we did the tally of all the attendees of all of our events, excluding tonight, ending last night, we've had 827 attendees in our events over the last week. So we're very proud about that. It looks like we have 27 so far here and about 45 have registered. So I think that we are creating opportunities for all Arkansans to come to the table and to begin to have the difficult discussions that Betty and Phoebe had long time ago, which they're going to be talking about. Coming to the table here in Arkansas is a project of the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement's Pulaski County Community Remembrance Project. And the four co-chairs of this massive event is myself, Kwame Abdul-Bey, my wife, Clarice Abdul-Bey. We have Sky is on here, Sky and Robert. Sky, if you could say hello to everyone and introduce yourself since Robert already has, and then we can get this show on the road.
Certainly. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to this. We've been planning this for a while and are really excited about the talk that'll be given tonight. Really very thankful for our guests. My name is Sky Brower. I'm on the admin team for these talks, and it's just a pleasure and an honor to be here.
And Sky, being as shy as he is, he did not want to let you know that he is a commissioner on the City of Little Rock's Racial and Cultural Diversity Commission. You know, we value everything that we're doing here, and we pray that those of you that are here tonight will continue to come at our meetings that we have every other week. This will be a special meeting, and it's structured totally differently than how we normally have it. But we have you guys all on our mailing list now, so you'll be hearing more from us. Is there anything that we need to go over before we get started? Robert or Sky, that you guys know of?
I don't think so. Did you want to go through the touchstones in the opening reading, Kwame?
Yeah, let's go ahead and go through the touchstones.
Okay.
I will share my screen. These touchstones are a way where we can all get on the same page and come to agreements on how we will conduct ourselves in this setting, in this forum. What I want to do is I want to give people an opportunity to we normally take a list of everybody's here, but there's so many people here tonight. I'm just going to, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to randomly call on somebody just based on the video. And if you're interested in reading a touchstone, then please feel free to go ahead and read the touchstone. I see David Newman. Are you interested in reading touchstone number 1, please?
He's muted.
David, can you unmute yourself?
All right, yes. Yes, I'd be glad to read it.
Thank you.
All right, we start with the guidelines for listening. First, be 100% present. Set aside the usual distractions and also listen deeply. Listen intently to what is said. Listen to the feelings beneath the words. Listen respectfully when marginalized people speak. We need to show respect and compassion for everyone. In addition, respect silence. After someone has spoken, take time to reflect and fully listen without immediately filling the space with words.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. And I'm going to go to touchstone number 2. And I'm going to call on, I see Wendy, no last name. Would you mind reading touchstone number 2 for us, please? You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Touchstone number 2, try it on. Make an opening for new ideas by trying them on for size. Give yourself the time to get to know them, to consider how they fit you. Also, when things get difficult, turn to wonder. Try both and rather than either or. When someone else's truth challenges your own, try turning to wonder. I wonder what brought her to this place. I wonder what my reaction teaches me. Also, allow for the possibility of multiple experiences and perspectives. Let both and create a larger shared space.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that. We're going to go to touchstone number 3. And I see in the chat, there is Kate Renshin. Do you mind reading touchstone number 3 for us, please?
Sure. Touchstone number 3. Identify assumptions, suspend judgments. By pausing to identify assumptions and suspend judgments, we can listen to the other and to ourselves more fully. Assume that no one present intends to harm others, even though the impact of another's speech or behavior sometimes may be to cause discomfort.
And touchstone number 4, I see Alex Thomas. Would you like to read touchstone number 4 for us, please?
Alex may not be available at the moment.
Okay. Let's go to Steve Foster. Would you like to read touchstone number 4 for us, please?
Yes, I'd be glad to. Touchstone 4. Remember that our identities, positionalities, and ideologies often inform our ideas and understandings are not always representative of the reality nor lived experiences of others.
Thank you. Touchstone number 5, I see a George West. Would you like to read that for us, please?
Acknowledge uncomfortable responses, say ouch or whoops, then explain. Let others know when you are responding with pain to others in the group, either from others or yourself, whoops. Help them understand the reason for your reaction. Alternatively, you can privately message the facilitator and describe what occurred that made you feel uncomfortable. Feel free to step away if you need. However, we are here to have an open and honest discussion about our topic. So we strongly encourage you to come to the table and join in this dialogue.
Next, touchstone number 6, would Barbara Hubbard like to read touchstone number 6 for us, please?
Sure, I'll do that. Excuse me. Expect non-closure. Stay in the present. We probably won't get to the end of the road today.
Thank you, Barbara. Next, Fred Sims, would you like to read touchstone number 7 for us, please?
Sure. Now we describe guidelines for sharing. First, it is always by invitation. It is never share or die. The invitation is exactly that. You will determine the extent to which you want to participate in our discussions or activities. Also, speak your truth. Say what is in your heart. Own your truth by speaking only for yourself, using I statements. In addition, no fixing. We're not here to fix or correct what we perceive as broken or incorrect in another member of the group.
Thank you, Fred. I appreciate that. We're going to go to touchstone number 8, and the person that pops up is Sharon Howard. Sharon Howard, would you like to read touchstone number 8? You're muted.
Yes, touchstone number 8, take space, make space. No one or two individuals should dominate. If you choose to share, please limit your sharing to 3 minutes.
Touchstone number 9. Let's see. We have Angela Spears Shaw. Would you like to read touchstone number 9, please?
Yes, I can do that. Touchstone 9. Resist placing the extra.
Are you there?
I think Angela's muted.
Angela, you're muted.
I'm sorry,
Now she's
can you hear me
unmuted. It's okay.
Resist placing the extra burden of racial spokesperson or expert on anyone.
Thank you, Angela. And we're almost finished with our touchstones. Let's go to, let's see, I see a Catherine. Catherine, will you read touchstone number 10 for me, please?
Yeah, touchstone 10. Feel free to discuss action steps and resources that group members can take and use to address the issues we discuss.
Thank you. And as we near the finish line, I see Reverend Elaine Bumford. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Would you read touchstone number 11, please?
Yes. Touchstone 11. Finally, after the dialogue, maintain confidentiality. Create a safe space by respecting the confidential nature and content of discussions in the circle. What is said in the circle remains here.
And those are our touchstones for tonight. Those are the agreements that we begin all of our meetings with. And I need a show thumbs up if you agree with these touchstones. If everyone could either do an electronic thumbs up or a human thumbs up. I see 100% agreement. Thank you. I appreciate that. With that, we're going to go ahead and get our program started. Tonight, we have two special guests that will be speaking with us. Okay, I can spotlight right here. Okay, I'm missing one. Oh, there she is right there. Where is she? There she is. Let me get the spotlight on her too. There we go. All right. We have two special guests with us this evening that will be talking about their book and their experience and how this book came to fruition, which is a story in and of itself that I can't wait for them to discuss with us. And they're actually going to show a video as well. But who we have speaking with us today is we have Phoebe. Let me hold on. All right, Phoebe Kilby and Betty Kilby Baldwin. And these are two beautiful ladies that have come to talk to us about their book, Cousins, Connected Through Slavery. A Black woman and a white woman discover their past and each other. I ask that everyone please turn off your cameras and mute yourself during their presentation. Once their presentation is over, then I ask that everyone turn their cameras back on and unmute yourself so that we can have a discussion with each other. Without further ado, Betty and Phoebe.
Good evening. I'm Betty Kilby Baldwin, a descendant of slaves.
And I'm Phoebe Kilby, a descendant of persons who once enslaved Betty's family.
And we have come to the table. The book Cousins is our coming to the table story.
So I'm going to start first because I was the first to discover coming to the table. And I did so when I came to work for the Center for Justice and Peace Building at Eastern Mennonite University in Harrisonburg, Virginia in 2006. I don't know if those of you who are on this call know that that was the Center for Justice and Peace Building at EMU was the birthplace of coming to the table. And I arrived there as an employee in late 2006 when the very first gathering of people in the country under the name Coming to the Table happened earlier that year at that university. And so when I came to work there, I discovered that this had happened. And of course, Coming to the Table brings together descendants of enslavers and descendants of persons enslaved to sit down together at the table of brotherhood, as Dr. King had a dream about. And I thought, wow, I wonder if my father's family had enslaved people. You know, when I thought about it, it seemed quite likely. While I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, my father had grown up in Virginia, and I knew the family had deep roots in Virginia since before the American Revolution. So I had that bit of information, but you know, when I was honest with myself, there were other things that would lead me to think that this might have happened, even though my father never said a word about it, okay? And what were these suspicions? Well, first of all, my family's racial attitudes, in particular, my father and my grandmother. They often said disparaging things about African Americans, and that's a nice way to put it. So I grew up with hearing those kinds of things. The family still had farms in rural Virginia. I used to visit my grandmother at her farm. And then while I grew up in Baltimore and later went to school in North Carolina, I eventually ended up in Virginia, and in 1994 moved to Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. And that's when I started subscribing to the local newspaper, and I started noticing that there were Kilbys often mentioned in that local newspaper, and they were activists and they were Black. That was 1994. At the time, I just didn't look into this and think about it. I could think maybe I was afraid to look into it. But coming to the table gave me the courage to explore this aspect of my family's history. So I began the research and quickly found that, yes, indeed, my family did enslave people. I went to the 1840 census. That was the easiest way. And there was my great-great-grandfather, and he owned 2 slaves right there. You know, in many ways, it filled in something that about my family that wasn't surprising to me. It was at once shocking, but not shocking. Well, anyway, I decided to continue with some online research, and for the first time in my life, this is 2006, I Googled my name, Kilby. I'd never done that before. Well, up came Betty, because she had a website, and she had recently written a book entitled Wit, Will, and Walls. I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if she's descended from people my family enslaved. So I ordered her book and read it. And right there, I just knew that our families had to be connected. For example, I could see from the book that her father had grown up on a farm located within a mile of where my father grew up in Rappahannock County, Virginia. They had to have known of each other, but my father never said a word about this. Anyway, I learned a lot more than that from Betty's book. I learned that she and her father and family were leaders in integrating Warren County High School in Front Royal, Virginia in 1958 and 59. Think about that, 58 and 59. I don't know about you, but a lot of people, including me, our school didn't integrate until, my papers are falling over. My school didn't integrate until the late 60s. So very early on, Betty and her family challenged the system to try to integrate the only high school in the county, which at the time was for whites only. Well, this story is an overwhelming story of bravery and grit. And Betty's going to tell you more about this in a few minutes. Okay, but at this point, I knew my family had enslaved people. I knew that Betty's family, from her book, had roots in an area of Virginia right down the road from where my father grew up. So this seemed pretty suspicious that probably we were connected. But I didn't know what to do next. So I went back to some of the leaders in coming to the table. And I said, what do you think I ought to do? And I thought they were going to give me, like genealogical advice. But no, they said, Phoebe, if you want to find out the answer, you're going to have to contact her. Next week is Martin Luther King Day. That would be a good day to do it. Well, I had just in the last month figured out that my family had enslaved people and was guessing that Betty might be connected to me. But, I didn't know if I was ready for this, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought that Martin Luther King Day would be a good day to do it. And that was Martin Luther King Day 2007, so 15 years ago. So lucky for me, Betty on her website had an email address that I could send her an email, and that way she could decide whether she wanted to connect with me in any way. So I'm going to read you from our book Cousins here, the email I sent to her on January 15th, 2007. She was Betty Kilby Fisher at the time. And the subject line of the email was an invitation to conversation. So, dear Betty Kilby Fisher, my name is Phoebe Kilby, and I am white. My father grew up in Rappahannock County, Virginia, near where your father grew up. I have been doing some research on my family and have also read your book. Having no definitive answers, I suspect that our families had some kind of relationship in the past. I admire very much your courage and the courage of your father and family during the civil rights era and since. It would be an honor to speak to you and meet you someday. I live about 25 miles from Front Royal. Through conversations, we both might find out a little more about our family's past. Martin Luther King had a dream that the sons of former slaves and slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. Perhaps we as daughters can contribute to fulfilling that dream. I hope to hear from you and to hear that you are interested in conversing with me, Phoebe Kilby. Well, I hit send. A day went by, no response. 2 days, then a week, then almost 2 weeks. And I thought, oh gosh, she doesn't want to talk to somebody like me. Why would she? But I decided to go back to some of my coming to the table friends and ask them what they thought I should do next. And the consensus was, maybe, your first email, it was okay, but you didn't tell enough about yourself. Why don't you send a longer email and tell her everything you know at this point? So that's what I did. I'm not going to read that email, but I hit send, and within an hour or so, I got a response from Betty. She sent me an email, and the subject line was, hello, cousin. Wow. I was truly touched. And her email was so open and welcoming. I didn't know if we were cousins, but I felt honored that she had opened her heart enough to me to call me cousin. So I'm going to stop now and hand this over to Betty, who can provide her perspective on my email and our first meeting, and also tell you her amazing story. Betty?
Well, Phoebe suspected what I had known practically all my life. Therefore, it was only natural for me to respond, hello, cousin. But here's the email that I sent back to her. Phoebe, if you're asking yourself why I am so emotional, the Cultural Innovations email address gets full of spam mail and is often down. I went to that site this morning and emails began to download. It could only have been God. We are the key to healing. Meeting you today is so awesome. People will find it hard to believe. I can't believe it. I've always known that we were descendants of slaves, but I couldn't open that door. I want you to come to all three of these events. I want you to introduce yourself and talk about our connection. We can not only contribute to Dr. King's dream, we can bring about racial reconciliation and healing to a nation of hurting people. I thank God for bringing you into my life. Signed, Betty Kilby Fisher. I was going around the world selling and signing my book and talking about forgiveness and love. The last thing I expected was a white woman challenging me to live Dr. Martin Luther King's dream. But here she was. A documentary based on my book, Whitwell and Walls, was about to premiere. Without thinking, I accepted the challenge and invited Phoebe to our family dinner and the premiere of Whitwell and Walls. I forgot to tell my family who was coming to dinner. We met at the Mill restaurant. I asked for the table facing the door so I could see them when they came through the door. I instinctively knew who she was. She showed no sign of fear. She was doing the very thing that I had done so often in my career. She was just like me, only in a different color. Well, my family was gracious, but there were a few mutterings like, "What are you looking for? How long are you gonna hang around? Where's my 40 acres and a mule?" That didn't bother either one of us. At the premiere, I introduced Phoebe and her sister as my cousins and told the audience, "Tonight, we are living Dr. King's dream of the sons and daughters of former slaves and former slave owners coming to the table of brotherhood." It was truly a night to remember. Then we played the documentary that you will see now.
See, Supreme Being seen as many things, but no one seems to see love reigns. Emotional cascade, wet all, bathe them in a sense of self-confidence and purpose before and after the sermons, all the preaching. What are we teaching the children? Teaching one another.
So much of the focus on civil rights history and scholarship has been on the triumphs and the strategies to achieve those triumphs. And so the focus was on those legal cases and how they constructed an argument and put the community behind these children and then got them into the school and then left them in that school.
Betty Kilby Fisher's story takes us to a deeply personal place in which we have to face some of what happened to individual students as a result of efforts to desegregate the schools.
What she is accomplishing now is something that Americans never accomplished in 1900. We've never had an opportunity to look back over the dark history of slavery and race relations in our country and to look these institutions squarely in the eye and to seek understanding and reconciliation.
Much of the beauty of her book is in the complexity, and the soul loves complexity. Things aren't neat and cut and dried.
As she's been telling to many people during the last several years, helping move that shift in the center of gravity in American history ever farther forward, helping us all come to grips with all aspects of our history.
When I heard him cry out, and he was saying, "Lord, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know." And I moved in to get closer. And he was crying. And I got scared.
Education was so important to the Kilby family, especially Betty's father, because he had lost land. He felt like had he been more educated, he would have been able to hold on to that land.
And so what we learn is a young child who has agreed to be a plaintiff in one of the many cases that the NAACP litigates throughout Virginia ends up being a victim on more than just a peripheral level.
We like to think that Virginia is like the cradle of Southern society, some would say American society. And so people are very aware of their place in Virginia, and they're very aware of stepping out of their place. And so for people to push during the civil rights era to step out of out of the status quo was just like an affront to civility, to gentility.
The first event occurred on September the 15th, 1958, when Judge Sabloff ruled that based on the landmark Supreme Court decision, they couldn't deny me and 22 others from attending the only high school in the county. The governor of Virginia closed our schools rather than to comply with Sabloff's rulings. My school became the first school in the history of our nation to close because of the massive resistance loss.
They actually believed, some of them, that if they resisted enough that they would get the Supreme Court to come to its senses and that the Supreme Court would change its mind. To me, massive resistance instead really exploded the myth that Virginia somehow presided over a superior system of race relations, that in fact that white supremacy in Virginia was always based upon the inferiority of African Americans and a belief that blacks were inferior, and that while perhaps there was more latitude for blacks in Virginia to advance economically and educationally, there was always a limit to that.
There is such strong feelings against desegregating the schools that the whites in power will close the schools before they will integrate the schools. This has an emotional and a psychological impact on the black child.
Like water drops on dry earth's surface, one may search this globe fourscore and 7 years, neither close nor near the truth. Religion may substitute for faith till all faith in religion, not God. Making someone else's decisions within your own life, your soul just ain't right, might be that it lacks love.
So it's not till 1958 that these court cases have made their way through, through the system, and that you finally have a series of judges in different parts of the state ordering that black students be admitted into the white schools in Warren County, Charlottesville, and Norfolk.
And the car stopped at the foot of the hill. And for a long time, I wondered why they made us walk through that crowd. And as I got out the car, the reporters and policemen, people were all lined up. And I walked past this big old fat white woman, and she yelled, "We're gonna kill all you little niggas." And I remember Jimmy pushing me in the back because I had just paralyzed for a minute. And I remember saying, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want."
It's not that moment you walk in the door of the schoolhouse and that's it. It's the day-to-day grind. She said that not one white person reached out to her or befriended her. And it's such a simple thing, such a small act of kindness, but no one did it. And part of it, well, the main reason they didn't was fear, that they might have even wanted to, but were afraid how others would treat them.
I could prepare for a test. Just knew that I was going to make an A on that test. Somebody would come along and say something mean and ugly, and that rage that I recognized came forth. And in the midst of rage, you can't think.
Those children, all of the children, the nameless children, were the soldiers who went out there and fought that battle day after day, because it really was a war.
I always felt guilty about going through the auditorium because the school officials oftentimes locked those doors, and they locked those doors with the purpose of keeping us from crossing over. And it was probably something that was going to keep us safe. And yet I continually went through those doors.
She was beginning to feel confident, beginning to let her guard down. And unfortunately, that's when other people took advantage and she was raped. Then all of a sudden, it's taken from her. You almost feel yourself being catapulted down this tunnel when she went into this deep depression.
Of course, that would be one way in which the system of white supremacy would target black activism.
When I was reading her book and thinking about that attack that she suffered in the auditorium, and I can imagine how traumatized she must have been. And then when she went on to mention in the book how she never told anybody about it, And I thought that is so typical. That happens so many times. I've uncovered so many incidents of that, but that's because Black women and girls even were taught never to put themselves in situations where they would be in jeopardy because their men could not do but so much to protect them. And if those men were called upon to protect them, then they themselves would be in jeopardy. So Black girls and women shoulder the responsibility not just for their own well-being, but for the well-being of men.
Those were some of the real consequences that people experienced as a result of massive resistance.
Perhaps I see things differently, like peace between you and me is the natural order of interaction, acting like we all God's children, regardless of the factions we fall into or the composition of our genetic tissue. We are human beings, one and the same. Shame we can't hold hands and profess love for one another, my sisters and brothers of the divine creation. What is it you are waiting for? Apocalypse?
Token desegregation really defines the initial wave. It's really not until the late 1960s, early 1970s that you have any sort of meaningful desegregation in the state of Virginia.
NAACP lawyers fought and won more cases in Virginia than in any other place, and just continually hammered away on every front. You began to have Virginia really standing out as a leader in a different way than it had previously.
I applied for another management position. Mr. Baker, the personnel manager, he invited me into his office and he shut the door. I should have known I was in trouble. He said, "What do you want now?" How many ways do I have to tell you? You're never going to get anywhere around here because you don't have the experience and you won't get it either. When I got to the car, I said, "Why, God, why? Why me?" I knew he was going to make me fight. And all the way home, I argued, "God, no, please don't make me do this."
This experience, which for many years quieted Betty, impacted her becoming a strong, decisive, assertive woman.
Her spirit is so indomitable that she persists.
I persevered, and in 1986, I became the highest-ranking African-American female at that Fortune 500 company. They gave me a $100,000 education, and baby, I'm using it now.
She still feels the pain of those experiences, and yet she's managed to resist the hatred and bitterness that can come out of it.
I gave a book to a young woman once, and she had done a good deed for me. A couple of days later, I got an email from her, and the email read, "That what you said happened to you when you were a little girl happened to me. My life has been blessed by your story."
The current direction of scholarship is to begin to examine the stories of the lesser knowns. And in that, you get not only the triumphs, you get the tragedies. You get the other side of the story, which is what we need in order to fairly evaluate the period that has passed so that we can figure out what avenues we need to take to continue to make progress.
We cannot just present our kids with a picture and a model of perfect success and overcoming, because that isn't very realistic. You know, there's a lot of pain involved in those sorts of struggles, and we do a disservice to our children if we don't share that.
To share with us and to share with the world things that she did not, that she could not even voice to her own family, helps us to understand where some of the anger and rage comes from as a result of living and existing in a racist society.
The lost cause idea that the Civil War was not fought over the issue of race, but of Southern rights, that race was no problem in the South before the Civil War, closed off any open public discussion of these very troublesome issues.
Increasingly, as we tell the story of people like Betty, and we encourage those people to tell their own stories, then these 13-year-old girls and boys and other young people will realize you don't have to be Dr. King. You don't have to be Julian Bond. You don't have to be Ruby Doris Smith Robinson. You don't have to be famous. These were young folks. Some of them in Birmingham were 8, 9, 10 years old who were willing to go to jail. So if you begin to show people that these were people like them who were the agents of change, it can help to liberate them to the point where they understand they can actually do something. They don't have to wait for somebody to show them the way.
Now allow these thoughts to soak into your better consciousness and grow flowers in your mind. Reclaim the beauty of mankind, for while I sat seeking life, I almost looked beyond love, but now love is all that is within my sight.
At this point, I want to acknowledge that you have your own story of desegregation and with the Little Rock Nine. And so I want you to know that, yes, we know that story. If you put yourself in my shoes, what would it take for you to go from being terrorized to hello cousin? For me, it was years of my father telling me that hate was like taking poison to hurt someone else, but the only person that you hurt is yourself. It took looking back over my life and determining who was going to stop me from accomplishing my dreams, then achieving my dreams despite the obstacles. I couldn't prevent these circumstances any more than Phoebe could prevent her family from owning slaves and connecting us by blood. Therefore, it was up to Phoebe and me to start this journey of healing and restoration. On page 172 in my chapter, I Am Free, I write, when I realized that I had the ability to learn and to make good grades, I knew there was something wrong with the many things that I assumed about myself. I had accepted as fact what some individuals in white society, teachers and others of influence had said, intentionally meaning to hurt me and keep me in a state of low self-esteem. I go on to write, I am responsible for the decisions that I make and my actions and responses to situations. I am responsible to seek the truth and acknowledge my history. Nearly 25 years later, in 2007, Phoebe, a European American, contacts me. I thank God that she waited until I was ready to take this journey with her. I needed that time to reply genuinely, hello, cousin.
So I'm sure I'm as amazed at that video and Betty's story as I am. And when I first saw that, that was the day I first met Betty. And wow, what a person I had connected with. I've seen that video many, many times, and I'm always amazed again and again how brave she was. And it also prompts me to think again, over and over, how easy I had it growing up. I can't think of one significant obstacle placed in my path toward getting education. Well, Betty and I met her family, including her brother James, and then Betty went back to Texas. So what was next? What should be the next step? Well, at that point, it became apparent that an important anniversary was coming up. The 50th anniversary of Betty and her brother James and the family having integrated Warren County High School. Betty's brother, who I just met, Betty's brother James, was living in Front Royal and had formed a group called the Historical Education Movement. And the purpose was to honor this history and their father. See, a lot of people in the community had forgotten about this or maybe never knew. So it was time to bring this back to life. And this is what the group wanted. Well, I thought a way for me to get to know them would be to perhaps join this group. So I asked James, would it be possible? Would he allow me to? And he graciously did so. So I joined the historical education movement, and they were in the process of working on the honoring of this history, including having a big commemorative event where they brought back a lot of people like Betty and James who integrated the school, and white kids, people who were children in this high school when the school was closed, people like that, and had a wonderful commemoration and told their stories. But another important thing was happening. The school board was renovating that school to change it from a high school to a middle school. And they were thinking about what they would name the school. And so, of course, James and the group wanted it named after their father, James Wilson Kilby. So we lobbied the school board very respectfully, none of this kind of going into the school board and yelling at them. We asked them if they wouldn't name it after their father. And we wrote letters, we called them on the phone, we wrote letters to the editor, but the school board wouldn't do it. There were other people in the community that were working against that idea. Well, it was very disappointing not to win on that with our petition. But we didn't give up. We decided we could do something else. So at the time, Coming to the Table had some grant money, and they were giving out little mini grants. And we applied for one so that we could hire 2 outside facilitators to facilitate a dialogue process in the town of Front Royal, where this high school was. Kind of a truth and reconciliation process. We called it Our Shared History. And we sat down together for 6 months and met constantly and discussed this history, what it meant, and what we should do going forward. And at the end, we came up with some ideas about what we should do next. And the first on the list was to get a historic marker put in front of that school. A lot of states have those historic roadside marker programs, and certainly the state of Virginia has them. And we were lucky that at that time, the Virginia Department of Historic Resources was rethinking their roadside marker program and looking for news stories to tell, because they realized that the current set of markers they had out there on the roads was giving a lopsided view of Virginia history. They were mostly telling about, founding fathers' homes or Civil War battlefield sites. So they were very happy that we came to them, and we worked hard, and the school board supported that. And they actually paid the money to put up the marker. So I'm going to show you a real quick TV coverage of the dedication of the marker.
Tonight we're getting a first-hand account of what it was like during one of the most tumultuous times in Warren County history. It has been more than 50 years since school desegregation, and the students impacted came back together tonight to recognize where they came from and just how far we have come. It's a story that's new tonight from TV3's Sarah Robarge.
The principal announced our school was going to close. So at first, it would seem like a small vacation.
June Jeffrey was a senior at Warren County High School back in 1958. She says when she found out these doors might stay closed for good, it was scary.
We were seniors, and we needed to know if we were going to graduate.
June's class is called the Lost Class of 59 because many of these seniors never graduated from here. And these doors remained closed until a historic day in February 1959, a day Reverend James Kilby will never forget.
At least 150, 200 protesters, and they were hollering and screaming and telling us to go home and calling us the N-word. 16 years old, you couldn't understand why adults would treat kids that way when you wanted to get your education.
Kilby was one of the Warren County 23, the first black students who integrated Warren County High School after a judge ruled it unconstitutional to keep them out. After unveiling this marker that commemorates their fight for equality, Kilby, Jeffrey, and other members of the Warren County 23 and the Lost Class of 59 walked together through the doors of their high school for the first time in 50 years.
It's a sign of unity, walking up the hill together, being together. We've come a great way. We still have ways to go, but I just believe that we can work together now. It has broken down some of the things that have stood in our way to be here today.
I rejoice today because I've been through the struggle, and now today was peaceful, a day where, we could celebrate.
In Warren County, Sarah Robarge, TV3 News.
And an emotional moment for sure. The marker is set right outside of the former Warren County High School, which is now the middle school. You can see it as you drive along Luray Avenue. Tonight we're getting first-hand account.
There you go. So in a way, that project was a quintessential coming to the table project, a kind of reparations in that community and making amends for what had happened and honoring the history and bringing it back to light. It included all the elements we talk about in coming to the table: facing history, making connections, working toward healing, and taking action. So that was the beginning of Betty and James and I getting to know each other. And as I got to know the family more and more, I kept thinking there was more I should do to make amends for what my family had done. Not just having been enslavers, but also participating in Jim Crow, and also just the racism that I knew I had inside me still. So I went to them and I said, what do you think I can do? Is there some way that I could make amends for my family and myself? And Betty kept saying to me, well, Phoebe, you didn't enslave anybody. You don't need to do anything more than you're already doing. But I really couldn't let that go. I thought, there must be something here. And then it just hit me. Education. This family had put their lives on the line for education. What if I set up a scholarship fund that would benefit descendants of persons my family enslaved? And this would include Betty and James's grandkids. Well, that was an idea that they could contemplate. You see, their grandchildren were in high school at the time, and they were concerned about whether they'd have enough money to send them to college. So with their advice and consent, I established the Kilby Family Endowed Scholarship Fund. And this past fall, for example, 3 of Betty's grandchildren benefited from scholarships. And that continues, and my family is continuing to build the fund. And when Betty and I wrote the book Cousins, we decided that all our authors' proceeds for the sale of the book would go to that scholarship fund. So when you buy a book, you're contributing to the Kilby Family Endowed Scholarship and helping African-American children go to college. So now is the time for us to stop talking and open up this conversation to hear what you have to say. We'd be glad to answer your questions and comments about our story and our new book. But before we turn it over for the Q&A, Betty, you have something you'd like to say?
I want to say thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you at our table, experiencing our incredible meal of healing and grace. We encourage you to purchase the book Cousins and learn the whole story. You can order it from your local independent bookstores, from Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And if you want to know more about the desegregation case and Whitwell and Walls, you can get it from bettykilby.com. We offer you today, we have a Netflix documentary that if you have a Netflix account, you can go and see more of our story. It's the stories of a generation with Pope Francis. And it gives you some insight in both Phoebe and my story. Thank you.
Yeah, that's just came out. It's Christmas Day, and it's episode 2. If you want to see, really, Betty's the star of this. It's episode 2 of Stories of a Generation with Pope Francis. So now we'll turn it over for Q&A, and hope you have some questions, and they can be Easy questions, hard questions, whatever you have, we'd love to hear from you.
So if anyone has questions, feel free to raise a hand and ask them directly, or even easier, put them in the chat box if you'd like to. And I will read those out to Phoebe and Betty. And I'll start it off. I was so touched by your story, Ms. Baldwin. I was a graduate of Little Rock Central High, and my mother was actually there during the Central High crisis in '57. And hearing their stories, what they went through, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine, and neither can I imagine what you must have felt being there and having no support from anyone. I know that over here, there's often, there's been the excuse, well, the people that were mean to the students, they were just a small bunch of people, but the silence of all the other white kids must have been devastating. How did you cope with that, and what really got you through that period?
We had a counselor, his name was Reverend Frank, and he used to constantly talk to us. On Saturdays. We met out at the lodge so that we could air our problems and what was going on, and kind of get our feelings out. And there were days that I would leave the school and I would go down to Reverend Frank's house, and I would sit there and I would cry, and I could just hear him talking to me in the background. We made it, and it was my faith that helped me also, because every morning when I got ready to go to school, I would look in the mirror and say, I am a child of God, full of grace and beauty, and if God be for me, then who should be against me? And yet it seemed like the whole world had risen up against me and what we were doing.
Thank you very much, and bless you. And I'll just ask one super quick question for Phoebe too. It's so touching that you wanted to continue on and create a scholarship as a form of reparation. How do you feel about the state of the push for reparations today, and what is one thing that we could all do to offer our own reparation?
Okay, well, you know that there are groups out there, including Coming to the Table, that are pushing for reparations at the national level. There's HR 40 and a companion bill in the Senate that calls for Congress to at least study the idea. And was it last summer? Maybe it was even the summer before. We had a representative from Coming to the Table testify before Congress. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be going very well. We've got a lot of divisions in this country. And actually, Coming to the Table recognized this a while back and decided that, as a group, we wanted to support communities and people individuals who wanted to do reparative acts. And so you can find on our Coming to the Table website the reparations working group. I actually started that in 2014, and it's continuing now. And the group has developed a reparations guide to give you ideas on what you can do at both the community level and the personal level, of course, as well as the national level. But if you are looking for ideas for yourself and for your community, that's a good resource to give you some ideas. And there are some local communities that are beginning to look at this, like Knoxville, Tennessee is one of them. And actually where I live, which is Asheville, North Carolina, our city council last year adopted a reparations resolution and has set up a reparations commission to look at what the city as a local entity can do to repair some of the harms. What particularly has come up is the harms of urban renewal and how African-American neighborhoods were redeveloped, and a lot of times they were forced to leave their homes and given pretty low valuations for it and lost some family wealth. And what can the city do to repair that harm? And as a result, also, there's a group of citizens in Asheville who set up a community land trust to actually purchase lots and help make some transfers to the local African Americans so that they can begin to build family wealth. So there's things like that that you can do. And the reparations guide, I won't give you one thing because, you know, there are a lot of different options out there. And so I would encourage you to look at the reparations guide. I believe that your leaders there have put a Google Drive document on in the chat early on that you can click on that has a lot of links, like for purchasing our book and things, but it also has a link to the reparations guide on there.
Phoebe, thank you so much.
Phoebe, I'd like to let you know that, first of all, thank you for that reparations guide. This year, the local Coming to the Table chapter, we will actually be going through that guide throughout the year. We were here in Little Rock, we were very motivated by the example that was done in Asheville, North Carolina. I worked with a group of city council members here who wrote up a similar resolution here, and we attempted to get something like that passed here. However, there are forces on the city council here that were classmates of Sky's mother over at Central that have been a little bit resistant to what we're doing. So we're going to use this year going through that guide to build up the momentum, and we're going to try that again because south of I-630 here in Little Rock, looks like somebody dropped a couple of bombs on it, and it's all because of urban renewal.
Right, right. Well, wish you luck. I hope things go well. And sometimes, you know, I tell that story of us trying to get that high school, the middle school that was being renovated, named after Betty and James's father. Part of it, I tell you the story where we failed, you know, we didn't get that to happen. And what helped turn things around was to have a community dialogue where people shared their stories and everybody felt their story was respected, and then they could move forward. So sometimes you may have to do that before you actually get to the point where you can convince a city council to do a reparations resolution, because you sometimes need to have that community dialogue to get the understanding. It's sort of like a truth and reconciliation. Well, what Kellogg Foundation is promoting in communities, that may be a prerequisite to getting something officially done, even though it's frustrating because you have to wait when you really want to make something happen. But that's just an idea for you, Kwame.
Thank you.
So we've got
Sky Tina had her hand up.
Yes, we've got questions are coming in. We're going to go in this order. Tina first, and then Kate, and then after that, I'll read a question from the chat box. So go ahead, Tina.
I'm just delighted to be here and to hear both of you women. What a powerful, powerful story. I am a retired Little Rock School District teacher and am aware of so many of the issues of desegregation, you know, through the decades, actually. And I do recall the 1957 crisis here. I was 8 years old and I saw, you know, everything on TV. We actually had a TV. It was in black and white, but saw the hosing of the students and the horrible things that the white people in the streets were yelling at them. And it just absolutely astounded me then. And my father was a clergy person, along with a lot of other clergy people who were in support of integration. And, you know, it was just something actually I will never, ever forget. And I commend both of you ladies so much for trying to, for writing the book and for obvious attempts to get the broader base of people who are probably, a lot of whom are very ignorant of these kinds of situations. It just amazes me, frankly, how very similar your story, Betty, was to the situation at Central High and the lost class and so on. We had that too. And it's just a powerful story. And I'm very glad to hear, Betty, that you got some help from someone with your all of the things that you went through, because I'm guessing there wasn't a whole lot of child psychology back in that day. There wasn't when I was that young. And to have someone that you could, lean on to help you through your crises, I think was wonderful. It must have been very difficult, but I just applaud both of you so much, and I'm so appreciative of your sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
And Kate, you're next.
I have a question for Betty, please. I'm just so impressed with the courage that you showed and your obvious fast faith. But I can't help wondering whether there weren't days when you just had doubts. Was this all worth it? What kind of conversations did you have with yourself? What were some of the hard parts? What were some of the easier parts? And also just a couple of easier, faster ones. Had you not been able to get into that high school, was there any alternate for you? And how old were you at the time when this all began?
I was 14 years old. Well, I was 13 when it all began. I was 14 when we integrated the schools. My father had lost land, and he had vowed that we were going to get an education. And so that was all that was to it. And there were no alternatives for us. His plan was we were going to Warren County High School, and that was it.
Our next question is from Shannon Markley in the chat box. And she has a question for Betty. I'm wondering if you could identify key experiences or people who affirm the strength you had to deal with the diversity you experienced.
I guess the strongest component was my father, because he was there day in and day out, and he was always encouraging us. And we knew that quitting wasn't an option. A lot of the kids, it was only 21 of us, and not all of us made it all the way through to graduate. But as far as for us Kilby kids, we knew that we had only one alternative, and that was to graduate.
Would anyone else like to ask a question?
Betty, I worked with the Mosaic Templars Cultural Center as a curator for the Arkansas Black Schools Project about 5 years ago. And what that project had me do is for a year, I traveled around the state of Arkansas interviewing people like you, little Black children who had integrated, desegregated the schools in their communities. And I did about 25 interviews before I couldn't take it anymore. And I couldn't take it anymore because the stories were so raw, and they were there was so much trauma involved in the stories, in them telling their stories. But the one thing that that recurred throughout those 25 interviews is the statement that we didn't ask for what they gave us. All we wanted was an education. Can you speak to that statement?
Well, truly, we didn't ask for it. We didn't have any choices. We had just run out of choices. My father had sent my oldest brother to Manassas to high school, and the little boys picked on him because he was just a little skinny farm boy, and he got in trouble for stealing milk. And my daddy went down to the school, and they told my daddy he didn't have any rights because he didn't live in the county. And they tried to take my brother's bus privileges. It was a boarding school. They would leave on Sunday and go to school and come back on Friday every other week. But my daddy went down and he raised so much cane, and he went back to our local school board. And so my brother did get bus privileges to come home every weekend. The next year, my daddy sent my brothers 26 miles out of town to go to school. They wouldn't give them decent buses. And my brothers had to walk to the railroad crossing, which was like a half a mile from the house, to catch the bus that was going to Berryville. That was 26 miles away. And one day the bus broke down on the road, and it was late in the evening before my brothers got home. And that's when my daddy said, no, next year I'm not going to do this anymore. And that's when he had heard about the Brown decision and Brown v. Board, and he decided that he was going to send us to that school.
We have a question. Thank you for that. We have a question from the chat box from Reverend Elaine Bomford, and she asks a question for Phoebe. You said you came to understand racist attitudes in your family. How did you break away from these attitudes enough to think differently?
Well, yes, I grew up in a household where it wasn't so much my mother, because her family was, originally from Pennsylvania, wasn't steeped in that Southern heritage and tradition. It was my father who spoke very disparagingly, and I talk about this in the book. My mother told me later on that we had a maid that came to our house, and apparently at 4 years old, I called her the N-word. Obviously, where did I learn that? I learned that from my father. So how did I break away from this? Well, it's kind of interesting. Baltimore City schools integrated very early in 1954, right? The fall after Brown versus Board. So when it came time for me to go to school, really preschool, in 56, my parents decided to send me to a private school, right? And it was all white. But what they didn't realize was this was a girls' preparatory school that had wonderful teachers that taught us how to think critically, also how to write critically. So they didn't know that I was going to a school that taught me to think for myself and to look at original research and write papers and those kinds of things. And then when I was a senior in high school, I had a history teacher that didn't really follow the textbook so much as assign books on historic events that related to current events. So we had a whole segment on the civil rights movement at the time, and I was assigned the book Black Like Me. That's an oldie, but it really affected me. And those of you who don't know that book, it's written by a man who purposely darkened his skin, was a white man, and then went south to see what it was like to be perceived as a Negro, is what they would have said at the time, in the southern states. And he was terrorized. He was just absolutely terrorized. It was a terrorizing book to read, but boy, did that make it stark for me that here he was a white man. He colors his skin dark, same person goes south and is terrorized and treated terribly. And that was the thing I think that really clinched it for me, that made me see this racism and want to do differently or think differently. So that's why it's really important, I think, to have good teachers that are willing to or help you think critically for yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have another question from the chat box from Fred Sims for Betty, and he asks, what were the conversations like with other Black kids in your neighborhood? Did they cheer you on, or did they chide you for doing that? What about other people in your neighborhood?
Right after the decision came down to, well, right after we sued the school board, Front Royal got together and they found funds to build a colored school. And the colored children expected that we would come back to the colored school and not go to Warren County. The problem was when we signed up to go to integrate this school, there was no turning back for us. So we were criticized, talked about, we thought we were better than the Black children. And I had to go to the other schools, and when I would go to the basketball games and so forth, I would cheer for the outer towners. We were not accepted by the Blacks, nor were we accepted by the whites. And on the way to school on the bus, we would talk about who the bad kids were, who were the kids that would kill us just as soon as to look at us. And we would plan. Early on, it was enough of us to get together to go to the restroom so that we wouldn't be caught out in the halls by ourselves. But by the time we graduated, it was so few of us that there were no way that we could partner up to get to classes. And in most of the classes that we were in, we were the only African Americans in that class most of the time.
I'm so sorry that you experienced that. I just can't even imagine it. It breaks my heart. When I was growing up, I always heard my mother's side of the story about what happened at Central High. And it wasn't until I read Daisy Gatson Bates' biography, Long Shadow of Little Rock, that I understood the other side. And my next question is for Phoebe. Since that time, I've tried to have talks with my mother, and she's a good person. She means well. She's a tough nut to crack. You know, I've tried to show her videos of the Little Rock Nine, and how they went on the Oprah show and had really showed some grace to some of the people that came forward to apologize and stuff. And it's tough. Have you spoken with your parents since? Have you seen any change in their attitude? And what advice would you give for how we could talk to our parents who might still hold some of those old attitudes?
Well, when I started this journey with Betty and James, my father had already passed away. He was a lot older than my mother, so he died in the 80s. He wasn't around, and my mother at the time, she wasn't the source of all this, but she was also at the time suffering from severe dementia. So I never really had the opportunity to talk to my parents. I mean, I couldn't bring this up to my mother. She hardly knew who I was, much less get into discussions like this. So I really didn't talk to my parents about this. And actually, basically all the people, the Kilby family members of my father's generation had long passed away. There was one aunt who married into the family, and I talk about her in the book, Aunt Lucia. And she was a historian, and she didn't know much about this enslaving history. So I really sort of educated her, but I was very lucky that she was open to this. But you see, it wasn't her personal family that had done it, right? And so it was a little different. So I've been kind of lucky in not having really family pushback. Even my generation, cousins that, like me, grew up in racist households, they've very much accepted what I'm doing and have been very supportive. But you know, I can tell you one thought about this. And there's an African-American expert in dialogue about difficult subjects. His name is David Camp. And he has something called the Dialogue Company. It looks like, Sky, you know, you've heard about him. And he has, I took a online class with him last fall where he specifically talks about how you can talk to and relate to people who think very differently than you do, and make a connection enough that maybe you can get them thinking differently. You know, maybe something will go off in their head about to cause them to rethink things, but you do it in a way that is respectful and tries to find connections, because, you know, I'm not commenting on what you've done with Sky with your mother, but, you know, when somebody says something to you that's kind of outrageous, there's a tendency to want to go, what are you talking about, you idiot? You know, be a little, you know, be aggressive and not very respectful. And that only causes people to seize up to their own position. So David Camp gives you some ideas on how to respond to things like this and to approach things like when you're really dealing with somebody who thinks very differently than you. So that's something I need to work on, but it might be helpful to you. And it's funny because this past Sunday we have an Asheville coming to the table group that I'm a co-facilitator of. And we decided at our last meeting on Sunday that we were going to use his method, and all of us were going to try to reach out to somebody who was different from us politically, culturally, racially, from a religious standpoint, and try to work on bridging the divides, something we all can work on. And it sounds like you've done a very good job, Sky, about being respectful to your mother. And you might find this method useful, but, you know, sometimes us older people can get set in our ways. You may not be able to do it. I see somebody's asking, is David Campt, C-A-M-P-T? If you just Google thedialoguecompany.com, you can find him, and you can find his classes. And
Alan, just to let you know, the Little Rock coming to the table, we are working on getting him to do something here. So right. you stay in touch with us, and you'll have access to him. So keep your eyes and ears open.
Perfect. I didn't know that.
But since you brought it up, Phoebe, I have to ask Sky, did you call your mother an idiot like she said?
No. In fact, some of my training from some of our previous dialogue training, I have used active listening and empathy and all that good stuff. So, you know, I just listen, I give her space to talk. All our touchstones, all that stuff is thankfully soaked in, and I'm very patient. So we never know what can happen. So I guess we're right at the end of our Q&A time. We really appreciate you asking questions. I do have one very short one. And where can we get a copy of your book? I know I'm going to be ordering one. And then, because I'm such a fan geek, is there a way to get a signed copy of that book and pay a little extra?
Before you answer that question, I want to say that I've been taking down the names of everyone who's asked a question, and they're getting a free copy of the book. Tina, Kate, Shannon, Sky, Elaine, and Fred. You guys are all getting a free copy of the book. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and you need to send me your mailing address, and we'll get the copy out to you sometime within the next week. But for those of you that want to go ahead and purchase the copy, or for those of you that are fan geeks that want a signed copy, I will turn it over to Betty and Phoebe to answer that question.
Let me add this on too. For those of us getting a free copy, which is a total surprise, how can we still contribute to that scholarship?
Okay. Well, first of all, regarding signed copies, Kwame Betty and I, for the ones that you're going to buy and give out to people, Betty and I have signed what we call book plates. Like
Okay.
it's just a label, but we both signed it that you can stick in the front of the book.
Okay.
So I'll email you, and if you give me your snail mail address, I'll send you. You tell me how many book plates you need. I'll send them to you. 7. Okay. 7 book plates, and I will send you those so that you can give people signed copies. Have you already bought those books?
No, I'm going to purchase them after this. So I'll talk to you about purchasing them as well. Actually, we need 8. Someone else just put a message in the a question. Someone sneaked a question in by the name of George West.
And I do want to say
it's a paragraph, so he must have been typing it all night long.
But
George, come on and ask your question. Come on.
I mean, I do want to say that I can also get with you. We have a bulk order discount.
Okay.
So if you order 10, you get them for half price.
Well, I'm
so
ordering
that would
10.
be cheaper than you but ordering 8 through Amazon. Okay.
I'm ordering 10, so I need 2 more people to ask the question. Let me get to George's question.
So
George,
I'll send you the information.
Okay.
And the book plates.
Indeed. George says, please share thoughts on how to establish a scholarship that is not patronistic, that is equally designed and given out by Black families, not by the white donors.
That's a big and a good question. And, you know, I'll tell you what I did. I'm not sure it's perfect, but I found a Black administered foundation to be in charge of this scholarship fund. They're in Pittsburgh, called the Poise Foundation. So they're African American, the whole staff is. And the criteria for the scholarship is that you just have to be a descendant of persons that my family enslaved. There's no academic requirements, and you can go to any school you want. I think what I would say is one of the problems is that you can't, if somebody applies, they can't just say, oh yeah, I'm descended from one of the Kilby slaves. They have to show it genealogically, which to me is, I didn't really think about that hard enough when I set this up. And so I really don't want to put the people through a lot of genealogical research hoops, you know, to get the scholarship. But what we have done, my cousin Tim and I have really done a huge amount of research on the descendants and have posted the family tree, Betty's family tree, that has cousins and all kinds of people on it. And all you have to show is you're related to somebody on that tree. And that's the best we've come up with. My goal is that I don't really make the decisions. The foundation does. They just see whether they're descended from people my family enslaved, and then they get a scholarship. And I'm also working on the idea of setting up a advisory board of African Americans to be in charge of this. So I don't really have any role in it. And particularly, this is a endowed scholarship. So when I pass away, somebody needs to be administering it. Now, that's not a perfect way to handle this, but it's one way, and it's my effort. Well, I see 22 things in the chat. Are those all questions for you?
Feel free to take one if you can.
Yeah, there's one last question. Patricia Ford, and I think this question was answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway so that we can give her the 10th book. She said, I thank both of you for sharing. I live in Portland, Oregon. How do I start a conversation like this in my area?
Well, I believe there's a Portland Coming to the Table group.
I just put the
Yes.
link to it in the chat. So
Yeah, so, and so I would start there.
And also, Fred Sims, he's on here. He's a longtime member of the Little Rock Coming to the Table, but he actually lives in Portland, Oregon. So,
Oh,
so
well, you
I
can
think
be a
that's
member
it.
of two groups.
Yeah, I think that's it. So I want to thank each and every one of you for participating into a night's Coming to the Table. We will continue our regularly scheduled bi-weekly meetings in February. All of you who are on here and who registered, we have your emails. We'll be sending you out more information. This is the culminating event for the National Day of Racial Healing in the state of Arkansas. We do have one final event on Sunday. The Baha'i Faith will be holding a prayer discussion and conversation, and we'll send that information out to all of you, as well as send you the link to our YouTube channel that will have this video and all of the videos for all of the events that we have held over the last week. Additionally, Arkansas PBS has joined with us to honor and celebrate the 80th anniversary of Muhammad Ali with a program called Ali in Arkansas. And we will be commemorating the 1969 visit to the state of Arkansas by Muhammad Ali when he spoke at UA Fayetteville, UA Pine Bluff, and Philander Smith. It will be a program co-sponsored by Arkansas PBS, Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement, and UA Pine Bluff. We encourage you to participate in that event. It will be on Thursday, the 27th at 6 p.m. We will send out information to everyone on that. And finally, on February the 1st through February the 28th, is our annual 28-day Arkansas 28-day Social Justice and Racial Equity Challenge, and we will send out information on that, and we encourage each and every one of you to participate. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or concerns, definitely reach out to us at apjmm2019@gmail.com, or you can give me a call directly at 501-442-7377. That's 501-442-7377. This is a joint presentation of the APJMM Pulaski County Community Remembrance Project, along with the Clinton School of Public Service and the Little Rock Central High School National Historic Site. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor back over to Dr. Robert Richards, who is a professor at the UA Clinton School for Public Service, so he can close us out.
thank you very much, Kwame. And once again, I want to thank Betty and Phoebe for a wonderful presentation, tremendously powerful and moving. And we're so grateful to you for taking time to share your wisdom and strength and courage with us. And thank you so much to Kwame and to Sky. I want to give a special thank to Dean Victoria De Francisco Soto and Dean Susan Hoppower of the Clinton School, who lend their support to this effort. I want to thank all of you for coming and for being present, sharing your wonderful comments and questions, and for helping us to move a little bit farther down the road of racial healing. So thank you all so much, and we'll be in touch with you about our future events in February. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all so much for coming.
We appreciate everything.
Thank you. Really
Thanks, Brian.
appreciate it. It was a good program, man.
Thanks so much.
All right. If you send me the email list, I'll contact these 10 people and get the books out to them after I order them from Phoebe.
Okay, I forwarded to you already I forwarded the Eventbrite registration page. It's in a spreadsheet. I forwarded it to you right at the start of the dialogue. And
Okay.
if there's and I've also got the chat open. I'm saving the chat, and we'll also have it recorded. So
Indeed.
We'll be able to make sure that everybody who asks a question you have the email of everybody who asks a question.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. I'm
Thanks so
getting
much.
off.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.